the question on my mind is how long are the Republicans going to successfully get away with lying to their own voters? How long can they pull this thing off? They're still getting a surprising amount of support, and well, it's surprising if you're watching the real news, as it were. I mean, it's surprising if you're watching CNN or MSNBC or NBC or ABC or CBS or reading the Washington Post or the New York Times, not to mention, Alternate or Raw Story or Truth Out or Common Dreams or any of these other sites. But there's this small percentage of Americans, apparently 10, 20, 30%, something like that, somewhere in that neighborhood, who get most of their, what they think of as news from right-wing hate radio. You see this particularly among people who drive for a living, because virtually every city in America has a right-wing radio station. There are very few and far between left-wing radio stations, but right-wing everywhere. And of course, all the folks who, live with Fox so-called news. So it seems like without this right-wing ecosystem feeding basically the lies that have supported the Republican Party up to this point, it wouldn't exist, which brings about some interesting questions. But anyhow, this brief history lesson, this thing that's floating around the internet. 1928. Step into the Wayback Machine. This is, 89 years ago. 1928, Republicans take control of the presidency, the House, and the Senate, followed by the Great Depression, massive unemployment, and a stock market crash. The next time Republicans took control of the House, the Senate, and the White House was in 2000. No, seriously, Reagan never had the House of Representatives. In fact, the House of Representatives, Republicans lost the House of Representatives in the election of 1932. They had it back for one congressional session, one 2-year period, 47, 48. And that was it until Bill Clinton became president. The Republicans did not have control of the House of Representatives. The second time it happened, where you had Republicans controlling the House, the Senate, and the White House, and a majority on the Supreme Court, which was also the case in 1928, although the court arguably doesn't make policy, so that's just kind of anecdotal or, interesting factoid. But in 2000 was the second time that the Republican Party took control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. And that was followed by 2 recessions, including the Great Recession, massive unemployment, and a stock market crash. Gee. And now, 16 years later, 2016, Republicans take control of the presidency, the House, and the Senate again. And this graphic that's going around with this viral meme. Anyone want to guess what happens next? Paul Krugman, writing in today's New York Times. I mentioned yesterday his blog post and how he has identified 10 specific lies in the Trump/Republican tax plan. His column today is titled, "The GOP is no party for honest men." And he says, according to a new CBS News poll, almost 60% of the American public believes that the current Republican tax plan favors the wealthy. Now, just think about this for a minute. 60% of Americans. So Americans know what the Republicans are up to, right? It's about tax breaks for rich people. American public knows this. And Paul Krugman is pointing out 60% of the American public absolutely knows this. But what's shocking is that 40% of Americans are believing the lies. That's massive. Krugman points out in his column today, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, by 2027, almost 80% of the gains from Trump's plan, the Republican plan, the Ryan, McConnell, Trump tax plan, whatever, almost 80% of the gains would go to the top 1%. Just 12% of the gains would go to the middle 60% of Americans. And more than a quarter of middle-class families would actually see their taxes go up, writes Paul Krugman. So he says the questions we should be asking, instead of why Republicans are pushing this so hard, is how they hope to get away with it. He points out that this is all about the big donors. It's all about the billionaires wanting their damn tax cuts. You know, they're outraged. I mean, this appears to be the thing that just totally pushed the right-wing billionaires over the top. Was that Obamacare, the Obamacare subsidies that Trump just cut off, were funded in part by a 3.8% increase in the capital gains tax, which is the tax rate that wealthy people pay on their income. You're rich enough to organize your income so it comes as long-term capital gains rather than regular income. You pay a top tax rate of 20% instead of 39%. And in fact, one of Trump's proposals is to, first of all, lower that to 15%, and secondly, to allow anybody who is wealthy enough to basically incorporate themselves to take their income tax rate from 39%, where it is right now, down to 15% by having what's called a pass-through entity. So you basically, you know, so I own, you know, this radio show, right, or this radio TV show or whatever this thing is. And if I were to, instead of, right now the way I pay myself is I pay myself a paycheck through, you know, an accounting company that pays all of our employees and handles, you know, our health insurance and everything else. But with Trump's proposed tax policies go into place, I could instead simply pay myself as a pass-through through the company, since I own the company. And if Trump's proposals take place, then my maximum tax rate becomes 15%. I mean, that's pretty amazing, right? And it's not just me. It's anybody in America who is, you know, doing business. And so it's like this you know, there's not a publicly traded company. And, of course, publicly traded companies, you know, the executives are more and more being paid with stock, and so they're paying that 15 or 20% top tax rate. That's what it's all about. So anyhow, Paul Krugman says the answer is a strategy. How is it that how can an administration sell such elitist policies? He says the answer is a strategy based entirely on lies. And I mean entirely. The Trump administration and its allies are lying about every aspect of their tax plan. I'm talking about flat out, easily refuted lies. Like the lie that America has the world's highest tax rates. Among rich countries, we actually have close to the lowest tax rate in the world. Or the claim that estate taxes are a huge burden on small businesses. Paul Krugman points out almost no small businesses pay any estate tax whatsoever. So he asked the question again, how do they get away with it? And he said, maybe, you know, maybe Republicans are just fine with lies. He says a great majority of Republican politicians know perfectly well that their party is lying about its tax rate. So my question is, do the Republican voters realize that the Republican Party is lying about its tax rate? What do you think? How long do you think that the GOP can continue this shit?